This is getting out of hand, and following the Toronto Blue Jays signing Max Scherzer, reports started to escalate surrounding the Jays' pursuit of Pete Alonso, but some brand new reports have just dropped, revealing some huge details and a huge update surrounding the Jays' pursuit of Alonso, as well as some interesting reports surrounding the Mets and Alonso that has Jays fans fired up. So stay tuned for all on this episode, folks. Before we get into it, if you're part of the percentage that aren't subscribed to the channel, this is the place to be for daily Jays content, uploading multiple times a day as updates continue to absolutely go crazy, continue to swirl. This is the place to be for daily content. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot to go over today, and we discussed it earlier today. Obviously, we know Max Scherzer got signed. There's been some reports about Vladimir Guerrero Jr. progressing towards an extension. But today, we got some more updates surrounding Pete Alonso, and this is just, the situation now has gotten to the point where the amount of conflicting reports is getting crazy. We heard initially that the Jays were closing in on a deal, and then we heard that they weren't closing in on a deal with Pete Alonso or Max Scherzer. Shadavidi and Ben Nicholson-Smith came out and said that, and then now you come out and we're hearing that the Jays are actually, of course, they signed Max Scherzer, but we have some new updates surrounding, of course, Pete Alonso. A couple different things here. Let's start with Robert Murray. Robert Murray doesn't think the Jays are done. Mentions Alonso and Bregman and then name drops their interest in Alex Verdugo. I cannot stress enough how angry I will be, and we'll cover this in a future video about how the Jays aren't done and things like that. But mentions Alonso and Bregman as two key names. Now, this is going to be important to keep in mind because this is a very reliable reporter, Robert Murray. He's been on the ball a lot here. He said the Jays, he doesn't think the Jays are done, mentions Alonso and Bregman. And this is stemming from the initial Bob Nightingale article that dropped saying the Jays have been really in on Alonso and he's their only serious suitor outside of the Mets. But if Alonso really wanted to sign with the Jays or anywhere else on a short-term deal, it likely would have happened already. So then you have Bob Nightingale kind of saying, we have some more tweets from Bob as well as some other updates here. But Bob Nightingale basically came out today and said he thinks that all signs are pointing to the Mets signing Pete Alonso. So a very different tune. And let's not forget, after Max Scherzer signed yesterday, Bob Nightingale also tweeted that he would suspect the Jays would be in top of the order, in the front of the line, in highest pursuit of Pete Alonso, assuming he doesn't go with the Mets. And even though he's not, Jays aren't in the front of the line now, according to him, it's very interesting how he changes up a little bit there. Because again, he is saying that, and if you've been reading the reports, that the Mets are the front runners to land Pete Alonso at this moment. And today was the first time in a very long time that the Mets seem to be the front runners. Ever since Steve Cohen came out and said they don't really want anything to do with, Pete Alonso, things have gotten very interesting. And again, he says that the Jays are the only other serious suitor. So it's between the Mets and the Jays here. But this report dropped. Again, this is from Bob Nightingale. The Toronto Blue Jays really have been Alonso's only serious suitor. And if he really wanted to sign somewhere else on a short-term deal, it likely would have happened already. Alonso has made it clear he wants to go back to the Mets. And as much as the Mets would welcome him back, owner Steve Cohen publicly made it clear they simply won't meet Alonso's contract proposal. So things start to get very interesting now because we're obviously talking about, Bob Nightingale. He seems to think that the Mets are going to come to an agreement. There have been a bunch of rumblings on Mets Twitter and in Mets Nation surrounding Pete Alonso. Some guys that are tuned in saying that the deal is going to get done today. As of the time of recording, the deal has not gotten done, so that could be chalked up as just rumors and not reporting. But either way, today was the day where a ton of traction was gained surrounding the New York Mets and Pete Alonso rather than the Toronto Blue Jays. And for the first time in a while, the Jays aren't the front runners or aren't being seen as the front runners to land Pete Alonso, which is very different tune than it was just a couple days ago. And then we had a report come out tonight from Pat Ragosa saying there's widespread industry belief that Alonso's preference is to remain with the Mets. This theory makes sense given he has yet to sign any deal with the seriously interested Toronto Blue Jays, who he has been speaking to for a while now. Former Met and future Hall of Fame starter Max Scherzer signed on the Blue Jays Thursday. Scherzer and Alonso, again, Scherzer, we all know, signed on the Blue Jays on Thursday, but Scherzer and Alonso are close friends, and Toronto brass, as well as others around the game, are under the impression that the right-hander could help recruit Alonso to the Jays. Toronto's goal is to land two of Scherzer, Alonso, and Bregman. So some new information here, kind of just doubling down on some of the information we know in the sense of, the biggest piece of information here is that not only are Scherzer and Alonso friends, but Toronto media and others around the game are under the impression that this will help the Toronto Blue Jays get Pete Alonso. But again, the situation is at the point now where you're getting so many conflicting reports. You hear Bob Nightingale saying that he thinks, signs are progressing to a deal getting done as soon as today for the Mets and Alonso. You then have Robert Murray coming out and saying that the Jays are still very much in on Alonso and that things aren't done there. You have Jim Bowden coming out and saying there's no question who the most aggressive teams right now are for Alonso, and it is the Blue Jays and the Cubs, which is the opposite of what Bob Nightingale is saying, where he's saying the Jays are really the only serious suitor. Now, I can't see him going to the Cubs. I could see him, of course, returning to the Mets. But it's a very interesting situation now where you have so many different reporters. Now, again, whether or not, I think Bob Nightingale is probably the more reliable one out of all these. You can maybe argue Robert Murray, but even then, saying Bob Nightingale is super reliable. He's been pretty reliable lately. And surrounding some more information regarding the talks of, the Mets and surrounding Pete Alonso. Speaking of Alonso, the Mets are back in talks with the first baseman, and there is belief that some progress has been made towards a reunion. That doesn't mean it is close or a guarantee anything will get done, but it's a positive, it's a good sign following last weekend's verbal fireworks. That's a big thing here. It is a positive sign. The chance of Alonso return to the Queens appear to have risen since Saturday's public show and tell from Mets owner Steve Cohen about how exhausting the negotiations have been. So now you're hearing from this Pat Ragosa, a fairly notable Mets reporter, that hey, the Mets are now they're in serious talks, but they are progressing towards a reunion. So 2 days ago, the Mets had no interest necessarily in bringing back Pete Alonso, and now we're hearing that the Mets are hopefully closing in on a reunion. According to Mets fans, obviously, before Jays fans are hoping it doesn't happen. It's just getting to the point where there's so many different conflicting rumors. Now, I do think that a resolution will happen shortly. Usually when you hear all this smoke, a resolution will happen. I'm still holding out hope for the Toronto Blue Jays to land one of Alonso or Alex Bregman. And Alex Bregman could be more likely if, of course, Alonso dips out and goes to New York, returns to New York. But it's just getting very interesting. And again, Bob Nightingale came out and said it seems almost inevitable that Pete Alonso returns to the Mets. That is his words, which is super intriguing. And I'm assuming most of this is coming from the fact that it is clear that that Alonso wants the Mets. Steve Cohen and the Mets have had it with with Scott Boras' negotiation, Alonso's agent. So they're just backing off. And the only offer on the table now is the Jays and Alonso, which makes sense as to why the Jays were considered favorites for a while, because everyone would figure the deal would be done. But now it seems like Pete Alonso is holding out so long. He's holding out all these hopes because he wants to be a Met. The question now becomes, let me know down below, do you even want Pete Alonso to be a Toronto Blue Jay if clearly he has his eyes set on, he has his mindset on, and his eyes set everywhere set on the New York Mets, because he doesn't want to return to, he doesn't want to come to Toronto, it seems. That being said, I will open him with, I'll be happy if he comes to Toronto. There'll be no doubt about that. And you can see this here from Bob Nightingale. While it seems almost inevitable that Pete Alonso returns to the Mets, the Detroit Tigers and Boston Red Sox loom as co-favorites for Bregman. Someone saying here, what I would like to see is the Toronto Blue Jays pull a fast one. It's snag Alonso or Bregman. I know that Bob, Jeff, Ken, etc. always seem to be the most credible, but it sure does seem like they're biased against the Jays. I don't necessarily agree with the bias against the Jays thing. I wanted to bring this up because it's interesting that things have shifted so much when it comes. Now, some reporters have certainly been biased against the Jays, i.e. John Heyman, some of the other guys in the past. But let me know down below, do you think reporters at this point are still being biased towards the Toronto Blue Jays? I think there definitely is some, specifically Ken Rosenthal, John Heyman, of course, as well. Always seems to throw the Blue Jays name there. But I wanted to let you know, I wanted to see what your guys' thoughts are on that. But also from the report itself, Tigers and Red Sox are co-favorites for Bregman. Now, Bregman is not listed as a Blue Jays favorite here, which is interesting. I think the Jays are very much in on Alex Bregman, but we're getting to the point now where there's so much different reporting going on that it's a little bit hard to decipher what is the reality. And I think a lot of it is Scott Boras playing games, telling different reporters different things in order to get the Toronto Blue Jays or whatever teams are bidding to get his client the most money, which is his job. But I'm going to err on the side of caution. I do ultimately think that the Toronto Blue Jays get one of these guys, whether it's Pete Alonso, whether it is, they got Max Scherzer or Alex Bregman, is up to you guys. But let me know down below what your thoughts are. Thank you guys for watching. See you later. Cheers.